Hello everyone. So today I am going to start adding acrylic to these 3 canvases that are just part of this healing process that I've gone through. The initial colors essentially look at the healing process, and now as I start to add acrylic, I'm going to do that in a very systematic way. So first I'm going to start with the black, this nothingness that I explained in a previous video. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make this canvas darker, this one kind of a medium color, and this one a little bit lighter as I go through these 3 colors. So I've got the red and the black and this surprise purple that kind of popped up. So those 3 colors are going to be very dark colors. And then as we move into the second canvas, I'm going to just carry over the light color. So I'll start with pure black here, and then I'll start to expand that with some kind of a charcoal gray. Well, the charcoal gray will actually transfer. So I want to keep the same color as I go from side to side. I'm just going to keep lightening it up. So I've got, and I'm also going to change my brush stroke a little. So again, these pictures represent a healing process. So that means that this is something that is taking course over time and it's uncomfortable. And so this picture is going to definitely be more of an abstract, soft brush strokes, lots of motion, fluidity, hard to figure out what's going on. This one is going to have more lines in it, a little bit more defined color changes. And then this one, I'm going to attempt to make definitive shapes. I am least comfortable with this, and that makes sense that when you go through something and you're used to it, it's very uncomfortable to try something different. So this is going to be very representative of the healing process. And so I have just a little bit of water on my brush, and I'm going to start on this canvas here with just plain black. And again, black, red, very powerful colors. And so that is, but for this particular canvas, we want that black to really stand out. So I'm just going to kind of go in these dark areas that I'm kind of seeing. Quite a bit more water. This is pretty thick paint. So I'm just going to kind of get some of those darker areas defined that I see as they're coming out. And I'm definitely, accenting some that I see, some that I don't. You might see different ones. I see these, and so I'm just going to keep accenting those really dark spots with just plain black. Goes right up into this purpley color that kind of came about that I wasn't really planning on, but it just happened to come about, and that's fine. That is actually what we want, and kind of an intuitive painting to let things happen as they will. And in this particular painting, that worked out really well. That we're able to get some colors that showed up that I was not expecting. So again, this is mostly very, very black, very dark. That is what it inspired this painting, and so we want to definitely honor that inspiration for the painting. And then where it goes from there after the inspiration, then that's a whole other story. So there's all the black that I'm going to put in here. And now I'm going to add a little bit of white to this, to trying to aim for a little bit of a charcoal gray. If I get lighter or darker, that's fine, but that's kind of the general direction that I'm going with my gray. So I have a little bit of white in my palette. Let's see. I'm going to actually start just a whole new pile. That's going to be that charcoal gray. so just dipping into my existing black. I'm trying to save my black as much as possible because I do have another thing that I want to do on this canvas. So not quite. So I've got kind of not quite a charcoal. We could go probably a little bit darker with that. Again, getting smaller, keeping that nice and smooth so that it flows. And there we go. That's nice and dark. And so I'm just going to kind of fill in next to that black. And they're definitely going to overlap. And then as I continue to go outward from this black and charcoal gray, we'll notice that some of the other do some like lighter grays too. But for the most part, we want this part to be very, very dark. This is a very dark. It represents a very dark time in my life, and so we want to make sure that we honor that dark, dark place. And this is a perfect shade. I'm not going to change it at all. Just keep adding water to make sure that it blends. And part of the reason that I am leaving this this nice bright white line is that's going to we're going to go back and backfill that with that unique purplish color that kind of came up by accident. We got a little bit of that dark gray going on up here too. So I'm just trying to not get into that purple part too much, but definitely get close. And as I'm doing this, the black is mixing with the gray and it is darkening it. That's perfectly fine. I am going to go back and just kind of go back with a brush and make sure that they do blend. I'm not going to have to do much blending because this is, and actually now that I'm looking at this, I actually kind of like the idea of that being a even lighter gray. This is one of those things where you definitely don't want to go in with a plan. We want to just kind of see where it ends up. And this is entirely just kind of rolling with whatever comes out of this painting. I'm not gonna try to force it. I'm gonna definitely keep it as abstract as possible. The other paintings will be a little bit more forced as they try to create more concrete images. And that all looks good. I am going to do just a little bit of blending. So I'm just kind of keeping my brush maybe a little bit drier because this black is pretty wet. I actually do want more black on my brush. So just kind of blending a wet brush and just a dab of black paint to get those colors to really blend in. And right here we've got maybe it's a little bit thinner on paint, so we're just going to add more paint to that. And then as I do that, I'm going to keep blending these colors. They're blending quite well. Got a little bit more of that lighter color, and I can always come back in and darken this as I go, but for the most part, this is quite well blended. And as this acrylic paint is pretty watery, it is going to blend on its own naturally, but just helping it along. Perfect. All right, so this is just going to sit and dry for a little bit. I am going to do a little bit more depending on time. Now, as I said, I was going to just carry over that charcoal gray into this one And I'm going to use my angled brush and try to make a little bit more definitive lines. So it's going to be a little bit more, still going to be somewhat abstract, but it's definitely going to be more definitive lines in here. So just kind of making these a little bit easier to see, but still still abstract, but just lines instead. And I, just because the way that I painted on this, there were lines on it, and so those kind of stand out to me, and I want to keep those in there just the way they are. And who knows what they're going to turn into. And this is a little bit of a trickier process because I can't get too distracted, otherwise the brush strokes get pretty thick. They don't turn into lines, they turn into more mashing. Just making sure that I keep kind of a light, easy brush stroke. So if I were having a stressful day, this particular brush stroke, I wouldn't even attempt it because this requires quite a bit of control to have more just lightly touching the canvas. So, you know, that actually tells you a lot about the day that I'm having, is that, you know, I'm able to very calmly paint this without having too much of a heavy hand. These brush strokes just kind of go back and forth. It's very cool. I think I've got most of the dark places. Nice and jagged. And again, wasn't expecting this. It just kind of, that's how the paint dried. All right, so now, again, I wanted to add kind of a lighter gray to both of these. So I'm going to go back in and add just a little bit more white to that charcoal gray. My aim is probably in that, like, my brush was too wet. My aim is kind of in that, like, U.S. Navy ship gray. I don't actually know what color that gray is, but that's, having seen a U.S. Navy ship in person, that's what color it looks like to me. And so I am gonna, so kind of still a little bit too dark. We want it definitely later. And this is gonna go on all three. So this color, this nice light gray. So I'm actually gonna go back to my original, and I'm just gonna add kind of a line of gray. And it might cover up into that purple a little bit. That's okay, just because we know that purple exists, and so I will get to it later. So I'm just going to kind of get this white color on here. This it's kind of grayish color. I am going to leave that pink there. That looks good. And then over here, there's just a little bit of that white. Surprisingly, I was not planning on to add any of this lighter gray. I was going to make this very dark. I actually really like how it's turning out with the gray. And ironically, I just happened to add too much water here, so it's lightening up. So I'm just going to keep lightening that. That looks good. Now, again, because of this particular brush stroke, I am going to add just a little bit of water to my brush, kind of blend. Definitely less of the light gray on here. Just blending those lighter and darker grays. Because the goal is to make this more dark than light. Just making sure that those colors blend in together. go. And that is good for this guy. I'm gonna let him dry, and now I'm gonna go back to my jagged lines. So same thing, my brush has a little bit of the charcoal gray, but I'm gonna just rinse that off and go fully charcoal gray because this is a little bit more of that precision painting. And so just getting a little bit of the navy ship gray on here. And I'm just gonna kind of go alongside where those existing lines are and kind of blending in a little bit, which just happens, that happens, it's wet paint. And just kind of getting some of these areas filled in. And I will go in maybe with a little bit of a lighter gray. We'll see. Maybe even some white. But again, this middle painting was supposed to be a little bit medium darkness, not too bright. So I would be happy if this was as light as it goes. But if we end up adding a little bit of white, that's fine too. So these are quite a bit of spots on here that are definitely hard to navigate with this particular brush stroke, but really enjoying that process of the challenge of it, of trying to get the paint covered up. I feel like I should have some music or something playing in the background. I'm quite focused on this. And you can see that as I continue to change directions with my brush stroke, the colors are mixing and changing, and that's perfectly fine. And I like how this is becoming even more jagged. So in my mind, when I was talking about this particular time in my life, the healing process of my journey, I very much talked about it feeling like I had a lot of pain that was rusty feeling. And this certainly is depicting jaggedness and that type of feeling. So that's a very cool thing that kind of came about organically. Just a little bit of those very jagged sharp edges. So much canvas. This is a very, very time-consuming process. So, but it's very fun, very calming, as I've said before in some of my videos. That it's a very relaxing process, just as it is for many of my viewers. But it's very calming just to watch. So, whether you're watching or doing, it's a calming process. Now, I am very intentionally leaving. So these are a little bit lighter spots. I can do the idea of going back in and adding a little bit of some white to that. So definitely want to make sure that I leave some room for that white to come in. So that is all the dark gray on this particular one, and I could do this all day. This is very fun. Now comes the tricky part, the part that I am least comfortable with, and that is fine, very fine, defined, not abstract definition. And I am going to move my palette just a little, trying not to show too many of the supplies that I use, because obviously I don't sponsor any one brand. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to very, very clearly define these spots that have mostly black. And I'm doing this with a very a little fine brush. and just very clearly defining all of those. And I'll continue to do that throughout this whole painting, just making sure that every single one of these has a very clear definition. This is going to be both red and black, so this bigger painting, the first painting, that red and black, that's going to be on both. This whole thing is going to be condensed down here. So the colors that I'm using here are going to be.
You want to leave at 12:30, Lovey Bear?
So all of these colors are going to be condensed from this big picture to this third picture. And so whatever colors I use, but they're going to be lighter. That's the key is there. They're going to still be here. They're just going to be much lighter, much more well defined, much clearer. Don't know what the shapes are going to be, but and mistakes still happen. Like I was trying to stay within the lines, but I didn't know exactly. Those mistakes still can happen on this very fine-tuned type of painting, but it's still very much still works. Last right here, just a little bit, but I'm just very, very defining. You can see not straight line. But this is, again, trying to be as exact as possible in this one. I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. That's not how I paint, and so it'll be fun to explore that. So then the last step that we're going to do is I am going to add just a little bit of bright white to both of these last two paintings. And I don't know if I want to do necessarily bright white. I very much like the idea of gray, but we'll see. We'll see what it turns out like. The bright white is good for any painting. But again, this is mostly jagged, so I'm going to add some jagged white lines to this to add that. So again, this is getting into that purple range, so I don't want to get into that too much, but just adding a few white places where I maybe didn't get some paint. And I did this in my previous painting, or one of my visitor or viewer question paintings, where the paint, I just happened to miss a few spots, and so I just backfilled with a little bit of some other color of paint. So that is what we're doing here. I did very intentionally leave a few spots without paint so that would be a possibility. Just very lightly adding some of those. Spots there. The idea is just covering up, making sure that the canvas has paint on every. That's really all I'm doing is any place that I see that watercolor coming through, just essentially catching that. And this is really, so as I've mentioned in previous videos, that my background is in science, and so I'm going to just give you a quick science lesson. This very much looks like a gypsum crystal cave. Very cool. I was not expecting that to happen. Part of when I took an intuitive painting class, she very much said that she could tell how I thought based on how I describe my paintings. And so, and I've mentioned that in a couple of videos, how I very much like to make the abstract concrete. And so I am seeing this very abstract painting that just looks very cool. And then I'm immediately trying to make it into a shape that's with my mind, I'm trying to make it recognizable. So, like I said, I see a gypsum cave as I'm painting that. It isn't, it's just an abstract shapes. Now, same thing here. We're gonna, again, follow that line with the white. Make it very clear, very exact. And there isn't a whole lot of white in here, but that is the next color in our progression. So, in this painting, or we started with pure black, charcoal gray, navy ship gray, and then we added white. And so we want to continue with that progression so that these paintings have some commonality. They don't necessarily have to, but that is my goal, is to make this progression of healing so that there's that idea that, even though we go through things, we heal from things, that we might be different people than we were at one point, but there are definitely pieces of us that are the same. Now, I am going to be honest, I have way too much water on my brush right now. This paint is a little bit watery, so that one piece might change in a future painting. So I'm just going around the edge with my white, very clearly defining these spots. I see that there's quite a bit of dark red, and I definitely want to leave that there. So I'm just going to kind of go up in here where I see a little bit more of that white. And like I said, that might be a boo-boo, we don't know. Again, just very clearly defining some white in here. I think that this is kind of interesting that of the three paintings, this one is the most, and definitely being a little bit more careful with it. And I would argue that it's looking the least recognizable. So I just find that to be an interesting thing, that I'm spending a little bit more time on it, being a little bit slower, being more careful, and I feel like it's the most abstract of the three. So this weight needs to go quite a bit up, so we're going to let that go up. Again, I'm definitely going into my gray a little bit, but we're gonna make that work. So we've got some white, and we're at about a half hour, so I feel like that's a good stopping point. When we come back, I'm gonna have the, I'm going to dig into the red. So that'll be my next color. And this is gonna take a while because I am definitely, gonna get into the red a little bit. I'm not going to work on the purple yet because that is something that I'm new to, but definitely going to focus on the red the next time around. Very similar progression where we have some dark reds, dark medium reds, dark medium light reds, and then very light reds. So we'll see what happens the next time.